Dawn crept over the Berkshire countryside, brushing gold over endless fields of dew-laden grass and waking the sleepy rooftops of Hawthorne stables. The scent of fresh hay drifted on a gentle breeze, but it couldn't mask the tension pulsing through the air that morning. As the sun burned away the mist, it lit up the sprawling paddocks and pristine white fencing, all standing in sharp contrast to the chaos erupting on the far end of the main training ring. The scene was pure confusion. Paramedics huddled around a crumpled figure in the dirt, a professional jockey who, moments earlier, had soared high in the saddle but now lay broken, victim to a horse's fury. A helicopter's rotors whipped the air, sending flurries of straw and dust flying. Stable hands clustered by the rails, faces pale, whispering in alarm. No one dared look directly at the black stallion that stood in the center of the ring, nostrils flaring, eyes wild, the infamous Midnight Duke. At that exact moment, a dusty old taxi rolled up the gravel drive. Oliver Beaumont, 17 and fresh from Bristol, stepped out, his sneakers crunching on the stones. He took in the grand, ivy-clad stables, the perfectly groomed hedges, and the commotion up ahead. He'd never seen a helicopter so close. He'd certainly never imagined his first day would begin like this. Before he could even process what was happening, the doors to the main office flew open. Charlotte Hawthorne, tall, composed, and every inch the aristocrat, from her crisp jacket to her stern posture, strode out, eyes scanning the crowd with chilly authority. Every stable hand stiffened under her gaze. "I want the entire morning crew in front of me now," she commanded, voice slicing through the chatter. "Every last one. Line up." A hush fell. Even the helicopter seemed quieter as it lifted off, carrying the injured jockey toward the hospital. Oliver, feeling awkward and out of place, melted into the back of the crowd, gripping the strap of his backpack, trying to look invisible, but Charlotte noticed everything. Her eyes flicked over the nervous faces. "I don't care whose fault it was," she declared. "Midnight Duke is out of control. I warned you all. No shortcuts, no bravado, and now a man could be paralyzed, or worse. I will not tolerate another incident. As of this moment, you're all off Duke's team. Get your gear, collect your pay, you're done." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the group. One man started to protest, but Charlotte shut him down with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "If I see anyone at all, try to approach that stallion again without my permission. You're banned from this property. Permanently. Is that clear?" She spun on her heel and stormed off, her boots snapping against the cobblestones. The stable hands shuffled away in stunned silence, muttering to each other, some already pulling out their phones to call for rides home. Oliver's heart pounded. This wasn't the friendly, picture-perfect start he'd hoped for. He remembered his grandmother's gentle pep talk the night before, telling him he had a gift with horses, that this would be a chance to start fresh after everything that happened in Bristol. He hadn't even met his new boss, and already the place felt like a battlefield. Curiosity got the better of him. Slinging his bag over one shoulder, he drifted toward the main barn. The stalls glowed in the warm light, but one stood darker than the rest. Duke's. Oliver paused, peering inside. The black stallion was magnificent, taller and heavier than any horse he'd ever seen, his coat like polished obsidian. He stomped, ears pinned, eyes fixed on Oliver with a look that dared him to come closer. From down the aisle, someone hissed, "Don't go near him. He's not safe. He's never been safe." But Oliver barely heard. There was something in the horse's eyes, a flicker of confusion beneath the anger. He edged closer, step by careful step, the rough boards creaking under his weight. The other stable hands watched, horrified, expecting a repeat of the morning's disaster. Duke's massive head whipped around, teeth bared, his muscles coiled, ready to lunge, to defend his territory. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. For a split second, he thought about backing away, about turning and running out the door and never coming back. But something in him held steady. He forced his voice to stay calm. "Easy, Duke," he said, barely above a whisper. The stallion froze. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Dust motes swirled in a beam of sunlight. The barn was silent except for the steady thud of Oliver's heart in his ears. Then, impossibly, Duke's stance softened, just slightly. He didn't charge. He didn't rear. Instead, he let out a sharp snort and pawed at the straw, watching Oliver with wary interest. Behind him, Charlotte had returned, arms folded, eyebrows raised so high they nearly touched her hairline. "You have a death wish, boy?" she asked, her tone icy but not entirely without intrigue. The other staff hung back, eyes wide. Oliver glanced over his shoulder, swallowing hard. "No, ma'am. Just wanted to say hello." Charlotte looked from the black stallion to the boy, considering. She didn't smile, but the barest hint of respect crept into her expression. "Well, I suppose we'll see if you're as brave as you are foolish." And just like that, the first challenge was set. The peaceful routine of Hawthorne stables was shattered. Something had changed in the air, and not just because of the morning's chaos. From that moment on, nothing would be quite the same for Oliver, for Charlotte, or for the notorious Midnight Duke. As the sun climbed higher, the stable hands gossiped about the new kid and the mad horse. Some placed bets on how long Oliver would last before packing his bags for Bristol. Charlotte, meanwhile, watched everything from her office window, making notes, reviewing the security camera footage. She had seen a lot in her years: broken bones, broken rules, broken horses. But never, not once, had she seen anyone, let alone a stranger, stand their ground against Duke and live to tell the tale. And somewhere deep inside the barn, Midnight Duke, once the terror of the track, now suddenly uncertain, sniffed the air and waited. The peace was gone. Something big was coming, and every soul at Hawthorne stables could feel it. The next morning broke over Berkshire with a hard, gray drizzle pattering on the old stable roofs. Oliver barely slept a wink all night, tossing and turning in his tiny upstairs room, his mind replaying the day's chaos. His first real interaction with Midnight Duke felt like a fever dream. What was it about the horse? A flash of recognition, a shared wariness. He couldn't put his finger on it. All he knew was that he hadn't run, and neither had Duke. By the time he made it to the kitchen, Charlotte was already waiting. She stood by the window, arms crossed, rain tapping against the panes, her silhouette as sharp as ever. She barely glanced up as he entered. "You want to stay?" she asked, not wasting a single second on pleasantries. Oliver nodded, nervously clutching his phone in his pocket. "Yes, ma'am, I do." She considered him, eyes like ice chips. "One condition, 24 hours. If you can get a halter on Duke by this time tomorrow, you stay. If not, I'll call you a cab back to Bristol myself. Understood?" Oliver swallowed, nerves jumping in his stomach. "Understood." Charlotte gave a curt nod, as if this was just another business transaction, then handed him a battered old halter. "Good luck, Mr. Beaumont. You'll need it." She left him standing in the middle of the kitchen, the halter heavy in his hands. It wasn't just leather and buckles. It was a test, a challenge, a lifeline. If he failed, he'd be gone before he even started. He spent the next hour pacing the yard in the drizzle, mind racing. He searched halter training dangerous horses on YouTube, watching video after video about pressure and release, body language, patience. Some channels made it look easy, but every second video was a warning. One wrong move, and you could end up in a hospital bed. Or worse. He made his way to the barn, heart in his throat. Duke stood at the far end, ears pricked, muscles tensed like a coiled spring. Oliver tried to remember every tip. Don't look him in the eye. Keep your movements smooth. Stay calm. Easier said than done. "Morning, Duke," he murmured, voice trembling. The stallion's only answer was a snort and a quick toss of his head. Every muscle in Oliver's body was tight, but he willed himself to slow down, to move like he belonged. Hours passed. He'd step in, Duke would lunge or pin his ears, Oliver would retreat and wait for calm, then try again. Around noon, he managed to stand within arm's length before the stallion backed him into a corner, hooves pawing the dirt in warning. Each time Oliver repeated what he'd heard. "Easy, Duke, easy." Each time the words came out less shaky, word traveled fast. Alfie Sinclair, another stable hand not much older than Oliver, but with the swagger of someone who'd seen it all, sauntered by. "He'll take your hand off, mate," Alfie teased, smirking from the doorway. "Seen it before. Poor bloke yesterday. I'm surprised he's not in a coma." Oliver tried to ignore him, focusing on Duke's shifting weight, his flaring nostrils, the subtle ways his body screamed tension. He watched for any sign of trust, but every step forward seemed matched by 2 steps back. By late afternoon, frustration simmered under Oliver's skin. He watched another YouTube video, fingers shaking. The internet made everything look so simple. Reward the horse for every tiny bit of progress. Never punish. Always retreat before things got ugly. But nothing online had prepared him for a horse like Duke. As dusk crept in, the barn glowed with lamplight. Most of the stable hands had drifted off, mumbling about the crazy new kid. Oliver stayed. He tried offering Duke a carrot. The stallion snapped it from his hand, nearly taking his fingers. Oliver laughed, nerves shot. "You like that, huh?" he whispered, and for a second, Duke's ears flicked forward. It was nearly midnight when things got worse. Alfie, never one to let a challenge pass, slipped into the barn with a couple of friends. They whispered, daring each other to mess with the demon stallion. With a mean grin, Alfie picked up a long stick and tossed it into Duke's stall. The effect was instant. Duke reared, eyes white with fear, smashing against the stall door. The whole barn shook. Oliver lunged forward, yelling, "Stop! Get out!" Alfie laughed, but his voice cracked with fear as he and the others bolted for the exit. In the chaos, Oliver managed to slip into the stall, hands up, heart pounding. "It's okay, Duke. It's just me. It's just me." For a moment, he thought he'd gone too far. Duke towered over him, nostrils flaring, chest heaving. But slowly, slowly, the stallion's breathing eased. His head dipped just a little. Oliver stayed with him through the night, talking in hushed tones, hands still. He remembered his grandmother's words. "Don't force it. Let him come to you." By dawn, Oliver was exhausted, his eyes gritty with sleep. He stood in the dim light, halter in hand, hope nearly gone. But as he reached up, slow as sunrise, Duke didn't flinch. He didn't rear. He simply watched, his breath warm against Oliver's arm. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then, without warning, Duke dropped his head and allowed the halter to slip over his nose. The barn was silent, except for the soft sound of leather tightening. Oliver froze, hardly daring to breathe. Footsteps echoed behind him. Charlotte, pale and stone-faced, stared at the scene, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "Well," she said quietly, "it seems we have ourselves a new horseman." The other stable hands, Alfie included, gaped at Oliver and Duke. Even the old groundskeeper, Rory, tipped his hat in respect. Oliver smiled, sleep-deprived and triumphant. For the first time since arriving, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he belonged. And somewhere deep inside, Midnight Duke finally let down his guard. Just a little. The following days passed in a quieter rhythm, the kind that let hope creep in around the edges if you let it. Oliver woke early, rising before the first slant of light reached his small attic window. He moved through the still sleeping house and out into the misty yard, boots crunching on the gravel. A low fog rolled in from the meadows, shrouding the world in gray, making the stables look softer, less haunted. Inside the barn, Duke watched him with that same careful gaze, but something had shifted. The stallion didn't pin his ears every time Oliver approached anymore. He didn't stamp or snap, at least not as quickly. Instead, Duke seemed almost curious. It was a small miracle, and Oliver clung to it. He spent hours with the stallion, talking softly, never rushing. He tried everything he'd learned. Warm sponge baths to ease the horse's tense muscles, gentle brushing to work out tangles in the sleek black coat. He started using a clicker, just like in the training videos. A sharp sound followed by a small treat, every time Duke showed even a flicker of cooperation. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but Oliver celebrated every tiny step. He found himself watching for the smallest signs. The way Duke's ears would twitch forward, the barely there sigh when he let himself relax, even for a moment. When he wasn't with Duke, Oliver pestered the staff vet with questions. He wanted to know everything. The best feed for a nervous horse. How to spot early signs of pain. Why Duke seemed to struggle with trust more than most. The vet, a gruff woman with a soft spot for lost causes, told him, "It's not just the body, boy. Horses remember. They carry what's done to them." The words stuck with Oliver. He couldn't help but wonder what, exactly, Duke was remembering. Evenings came slow and peaceful. One night, after a long day of patient work and small victories, Oliver called his grandmother Edith on FaceTime. Her cheerful voice filled the quiet kitchen as he sat with a cup of tea, tired but proud. "Are you taking care of yourself, Ollie?" she asked, peering at him through the phone's screen, her hair in its familiar neat bun. He grinned. "Trying. Duke's a handful, but he's not the monster everyone thinks. I think he's just scared and angry." Edith nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. "Don't push him, love. Don't push yourself either. Some things you can't rush, not healing, not trust. Let him set the pace. And remember to rest, too." "I will, Gran." "Promise?" "I promise." They talked for a while longer about the farm, about Bristol, about the weather. When they hung up, Oliver felt a little less alone. The barn itself began to feel different, too. The other stable hands watched Oliver's progress with a mix of skepticism and grudging respect. Alfie, who'd once only smirked or tossed snide remarks, started hanging around more. One afternoon, while Oliver was cleaning tack, Alfie burst in, breathless. "Hey, new kid, you got a minute? We got trouble out by the lower paddock." Oliver dropped the brush and jogged after him. They found a young filly loose, galloping wild through the high grass, mane streaming. Alfie cursed under his breath. "That one's a menace. She'll break her leg." "Let me try," Oliver said. He walked slowly, arms loose, voice low and reassuring. "Easy, girl. Easy now." The filly skittered and danced away, but after a few tense minutes, Oliver managed to corner her gently against the fence. He held out his hand, and she pressed her nose to his palm, trembling but not running. Alfie stood back, eyes wide. "How'd you do that?" Alfie asked, incredulous. "I don't know. I just tried to listen." Alfie shook his head, but his smile was real this time. "Maybe you really are the horse whisperer, huh?" It was a turning point. After that, Alfie's attitude softened. He'd show up with a bucket of oats, toss Oliver a joke, even stick around to help with chores. Sometimes he'd ask about Duke, curiosity overtaking pride. "Think he'll ever race again?" he wondered aloud one morning while mucking out stalls. "I hope so," Oliver replied, glancing at the black stallion, who now watched their every move with something that almost looked like interest. Not every day was perfect. Some mornings Duke would regress, refusing to let Oliver near, kicking the stall door until the metal rattled. Those days tested Oliver's patience, his faith in what he was doing. But Charlotte noticed the effort. She'd watch from the shadows, silent and inscrutable, jotting notes in her ever-present notebook. One evening, Charlotte found Oliver in the tack room, rubbing his aching shoulders. "He's coming around," she said, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "He trusts you more than he's trusted anyone in a long time. Don't let him down." "I won't," Oliver promised, determination hardening inside him. He started to notice more about Duke, too. The way his muscles quivered with nerves, the scars that crisscrossed his legs, the old brands faded under glossy fur. There were stories here, stories nobody wanted to talk about. But Oliver was learning. He was listening. One night, while the barn was quiet and the world outside seemed impossibly still, Oliver sat on a bale of hay and watched Duke doze in his stall. The horse snorted softly in his sleep, dreaming of other places, other days. Oliver wondered what it would take to heal a heart that had been broken by humans. As the week drew on, something in the air shifted, hope, maybe, or the beginning of forgiveness. Duke didn't lash out as much. He'd let Oliver touch his neck, run a brush through his mane. For the first time, Oliver felt like they were partners in something bigger, two misfits trying to find their place in a world that didn't make it easy. The world outside Hawthorne stables kept spinning. News of the devil horse and the new boy who wasn't afraid spread quietly through the local equestrian scene. But inside the barn, life settled into a gentle rhythm. The clatter of hooves, the quiet hum of voices, the slow, steady work of building trust. One careful step at a time. Even with all the small victories, a question hovered in the background, lingering in every conversation and every quiet look exchanged in the barn. Why was Duke so wild? What had broken a champion into a shadow haunted by fear and rage? The other stable hands had their theories. Some said he'd been abused, others swore he was cursed, but none of them really knew. The truth was more complicated, and Oliver was determined to find it, certain that understanding Duke's past was the key to helping him heal. The answer came on a rainy Wednesday, when the sky sagged low and the entire stable smelled of wet hay and old secrets. Rory Mungo, the oldest of the groundskeepers, and a man who'd seen more drama than anyone else at Hawthorne stables, sat hunched on an overturned feed bucket, whittling a bit of wood. His eyes were faded but sharp, missing nothing. Oliver approached cautiously. He'd always respected Rory. The man had a way of knowing what you were thinking before you said it. That morning, though, Rory seemed lost in thought, knife-slicing smooth curls from the stick in his hands. "Rory, can I ask you something?" Oliver began, nervous. Rory didn't look up. "About Duke?" Oliver nodded. "I want to understand him. Really understand him." The old man let out a slow breath, the kind that carried a lifetime's worth of disappointments. "You heard of Sir Reginald Hartley?" he asked. Oliver had. Everyone in the British racing world knew the name. Sir Reginald was the king of high-stakes betting, always in the papers, always surrounded by rumors and scandal. "Yeah, I know him," Rory grunted. Sir Reginald had big plans for Duke. The horse was bred for greatness, speed, power, all that. But he wanted more. Started bringing in some new vets, new drugs, stuff that's legal, just barely. Performance enhancers. The kind that turn fast horses into monsters. Oliver felt a chill crawl up his spine. They gave him drugs? Not just drugs. They pushed him. Hard. Too hard. You can get away with a lot in racing, long as nobody gets caught. Sir Reginald didn't care about the horse, only about the next bet. When the side effects kicked in, Duke started panicking, bucking, attacking handlers. Sir Reginald washed his hands of him, sold him off, left the mess for someone else to clean up. Oliver sat back, stunned. It all made a terrible kind of sense. The anger, the fear, the wildness that nothing could soothe. Why hasn't anyone said anything? Doesn't anyone care? Rory's eyes softened, sad and wise. People care, kid. Just not enough to risk their necks against money like Hartley's. Charlotte did. She took Duke in when nobody else would. But she can only do so much. She's got her reputation to protect too. The barn was quiet for a long moment, the rain a steady drumbeat on the roof. Oliver stared at Duke's stall, seeing the horse in a new, painful light. No wonder Duke didn't trust anyone. He'd been used up and tossed aside, sacrificed for someone else's glory. The weight of it settled on Oliver's shoulders. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like, to be praised as a champion one day and discarded as a problem the next. No wonder the stallion fought so hard to protect himself. No wonder every inch of progress felt hard won. As the story spread, sympathy for Duke grew. The other stable hands, once quick to label him dangerous, now treated him with more care. Even Alfie, who'd once called Duke the devil horse, started bringing him apples, standing just close enough to offer comfort without risking a bite. Charlotte, meanwhile, kept her distance, observing everything with a sharp, guarded eye. But late one afternoon, as Oliver brushed Duke's mane, she stepped quietly into the stall. She looked tired, her face drawn and pale under the barn lights. "He's lucky to have you, you know," she said softly, not meeting Oliver's eyes. "I don't know if I'm helping," Oliver replied, brushing a knot from Duke's tail. "Some days it feels like I'm making it worse." "You're not," Charlotte said. "But you have to understand something, Oliver. In this world, racing, money, the press, failure isn't just hard, it's public. If you can't help him, it won't just hurt your pride. The media will tear you apart. People love to see a comeback, but they love a scandal even more. Are you ready for that?" Oliver hesitated, feeling the truth in her words. "I don't care about the press. I just want to give him a chance." Charlotte smiled, but it was a sad, tired thing. "That's what I used to think too." That night, Oliver sat awake in his tiny room, thinking about everything he'd learned. His phone buzzed. another message from Edith, her encouragement a lifeline. He typed out a reply, telling her about Rory's story, about Duke's past, about his own doubts. Edith's answer was immediate and simple. "Forgive yourself your mistakes, Ollie. You're both learning." The next morning, Oliver arrived at the barn to find Duke calmer than he'd ever seen. The stallion nickered softly as Oliver entered, a small sound that felt like hope. Oliver spent hours with him, moving slowly, rewarding every bit of trust. When the other stable hands walked by, they watched in awe, whispering that maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. But as Oliver led Duke out into the paddock, his determination burned brighter than ever. He wasn't just training a horse. He was fighting for a second chance for them both. And deep down, he knew the real battle wasn't with Duke, but with the world that had tried to break him. For the first time, Oliver felt ready. He would face whatever the future held, scandal, failure, pain, because Duke deserved someone in his corner. And so did he. A week later, the world around Hawthorne stables was waking up to something new. It was more than just the buzz of a local legend being coaxed out of the darkness. There was a sense that the impossible might actually be within reach. Charlotte had been working the phones, calling in every favor she'd ever been owed. And finally, one of them paid off. A closed-door training slot at Hickstead, the most prestigious equestrian facility in the country, usually reserved for military teams and Olympic hopefuls. The staff whispered about it all morning, awed by the idea that a horse with Duke's reputation would be allowed through those gates, even for a single afternoon. Oliver barely slept the night before, nerves prickling beneath his skin. He woke long before sunrise, pulling on his best and only clean shirt, hands trembling as he laced his boots. He ran through the checklist in his mind. Halter, bridle, medical kit, treats, spare lead ropes. Everything had to be perfect. Charlotte was cool and businesslike as ever, but even she couldn't hide the edge in her voice when she said, "Let's go. This is Duke's only shot, and yours." The drive to Hickstead was a blur of rolling fields and winding country roads. Duke traveled in tense silence, the big black stallion shifting restlessly in his trailer, eyes bright with uncertainty. When they pulled through the guarded gates, even the most jaded stable hands went silent, awed by the scale of the place. Grandstands looming like castles, jumps set up on fields so smooth they looked unreal. Military teams jogged past in perfect formation, their uniforms crisp, their horses gleaming. Oliver felt small, dwarfed by tradition and expectation. Charlotte handled the introductions, her voice carrying authority. "Hawthorne Stables, here for the 5 a.m. session." The staff eyed Duke warily, but the papers were in order, and soon enough, they were led to a private arena at the far end of the grounds, away from curious eyes. The air was heavy with anticipation. Charlotte briefed Oliver in a low voice. "You'll have exactly 40 minutes to warm up. No mistakes. If anything goes wrong, we're done." She handed him a tiny earpiece. "I'll be watching from the rails. You'll hear my instructions. Remember, stay calm. He'll feed off your nerves." Oliver nodded, barely trusting himself to speak. He led Duke out onto the grass. The stallion's hooves made no sound on the perfect turf. For a moment, all was still, just the two of them in the early morning light, breath misting in the air. Oliver patted Duke's neck, murmuring, "You got this, big guy. We both do." The warm-up went better than he dared hope. Duke's ears flicked, eyes scanning the fences, but he moved with power and precision. Oliver took him through their routine, clicker in hand, rewarding every good transition, every moment of focus. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of what the old Duke must have been like, a champion, fierce and proud. But then, just as the session was hitting its stride, disaster struck. Without warning, a sharp crack echoed across the field, the sound of a starter pistol fired from the military training area next door. Duke's entire body went rigid, muscles bunched beneath Oliver. In an instant, the horse exploded forward, bolting across the arena in sheer panic. The world blurred. Oliver fought to stay in the saddle, but Duke's terror was absolute, his power overwhelming. Charlotte's voice was urgent in his ear. "Don't fight him, Oliver. Give him his head. Steady now." Oliver tried, but it was like riding a runaway train. Duke careened toward the far fence, wild-eyed, and for a heart-stopping moment, Oliver thought they'd crash straight through it. Instead, Duke swerved, and the momentum threw Oliver from the saddle. He hit the ground hard, air punched from his lungs, pain shot through his side and down his arm. For a second, he couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The field was silent, save for the thundering of Duke's hooves. Oliver heard Charlotte calling for help, the distant shouts of staff running to assist. He tried to sit up, vision swimming. Somewhere above, the sky was pale and endless, and for a dizzying second, he thought of home, of Bristol, of all the things he might lose if he failed now. Then he realized the thunder had stopped. Duke was no longer running. Instead, the stallion stood between Oliver and the world, sides heaving, head tossed high. Oliver could see the whites of his eyes, but there was no aggression, only fear and confusion. Then, astonishingly, Duke turned and stepped closer, lowering his head until his warm breath brushed Oliver's cheek. Charlotte and the staff rushed in, expecting chaos. But there was only Oliver, battered but alive, and Duke, still as a statue, shielding his rider. Someone gasped. Charlotte knelt beside Oliver, concern breaking through her usual reserve. "You okay?" Oliver nodded, sucking in air, blinking back tears of pain and relief. "Yeah, I'm okay." It was Alfie who voiced what everyone was thinking. He stood at the edge of the field, shaking his head in disbelief. "He came back for you. Didn't run. Protected you." Charlotte's eyes were wet as she stroked Duke's muzzle. "That's the first time he's ever done that." Oliver reached up, fingers trembling, and let Duke nuzzle his hand. The pain in his side was nothing compared to the swell of emotion in his chest. For the first time, he truly understood. They were a team now, bound by more than training or discipline or even hope. Something deeper, forged in fear and forgiveness. As the sun rose higher, the rest of the world woke to another ordinary day. But for Oliver, Charlotte, and everyone who witnessed that morning at Hickstead, nothing would ever be quite the same. The aftermath of Hickstead felt like waking up after a storm. Everything looked familiar, but nothing was quite the same. Word spread quickly about what had happened on the field, not just in the stable yard, but through the grapevine of British equestrian circles. Some called it a miracle, others a fluke. But everyone wanted to know more about the boy who'd calmed the Midnight Duke and the horse who'd finally come back for a human. For a day, Oliver let himself feel proud. But trouble has a way of lurking where the sun can't reach. It arrived in the form of Sir Reginald Hartley himself. The next morning, the whole stable buzzed with anxious energy. Charlotte called a meeting in her office, her jaw tight. Oliver, still bruised from the fall, but moving a little easier, tried to ignore the butterflies in his stomach as he entered, and found Charlotte seated behind her desk, eyes locked on a letter, a phone, and a checkbook. The holy trinity of power. Before Oliver could even sit down, the door opened again, and in strode Sir Reginald, every inch the aristocrat, draped in tailored gray, with cold blue eyes that flicked over Charlotte and Oliver like they were pawns on a chessboard. He didn't wait for pleasantries. "I've come to settle accounts, Charlotte," he declared, voice smooth as silk but twice as cutting. "I want the Duke. £500,000, plus a little extra for your troubles." He tossed a check onto the table with a flourish. Oliver stared at the number. His mind spun. £500,000. It was enough to fix the roof, buy new horses, pay the staff for a year. It was enough to change lives. Sir Reginald saw the hesitation and pressed his advantage, his eyes glinting. "And let's not forget," he said, voice lowering. "My foundation has offered a sizable donation to Mrs. Edith Beaumont's special school in Bristol. I hear the roof's leaking. That's a shame. Think of the children, son." Charlotte's expression hardened. She slid the check back toward Sir Reginald with 2 fingers. "This isn't about money. You want Duke for the wrong reasons." Sir Reginald smiled. "Nonsense. I want him to be a star again. His bloodlines are valuable. He'll do more for the sport in my hands than rotting in a barn with a nobody and a washed-up trainer." The words stung, but Oliver felt something else rise up. A quiet, stubborn anger. "What would you do with him?" he asked. Sir Reginald didn't blink. "Publicity, racing, a little marketing for my brand. Then stud fees, of course. Horses like him are worth more in the breeding shed than on the track, especially after a fall from grace. He'll be well cared for." Charlotte waited until Sir Reginald's gaze had flickered away. She pulled out her phone and slid it across the desk. "You might want to read this." On the screen, an email thread. Confidential, but somehow Charlotte had gotten hold of it. Sir Reginald's own head of marketing laying out a plan. Duke as the face of Hartley Bets. High visibility campaign. Transition to breeding as soon as press coverage peaks. Welfare is not a priority. Push PR hard, then retire the animal. It's just a horse. The office was silent. Even Sir Reginald's mask slipped, just for a second. "You have no right," he began. Charlotte cut him off, her tone like ice. "We have every right. He's not for sale." Sir Reginald straightened, feigning calm. "Don't be a fool. There are 100 Dukes out there. This is your chance to be part of something bigger. I can make you both rich." Oliver looked at the check again. His grandmother's school, the crumbling walls, the kids who deserved so much more. His chest tightened. "If I sign Duke over, you'll fund my grand school? Promise?" Sir Reginald's eyes softened just a little. "Of course. I'm a man of my word." Charlotte stepped between them, shaking her head. "Don't. He'll use Duke for as long as it's profitable, then he'll throw him away. Again. And your grand school? He'll fund it just long enough for the headlines, then move on. I've seen it 100 times, Oliver. Don't do it." A terrible silence filled the room. Oliver felt the weight of 2 worlds, the needs of the people he loved, and the trust of a broken animal who'd finally started to believe in him. He closed his eyes, trying to breathe. He thought of Duke's trembling body, the way the stallion had shielded him at Hickstead, the promise he'd made to do right by him no matter what. When he opened his eyes, the decision was clear. He took the contract Sir Reginald had set on the desk, held it up for all to see, and tore it straight down the middle. The sound echoed through the room, final and irrevocable. Charlotte let out a long breath. Sir Reginald's face darkened with fury. "You'll regret this," he spat, gathering his papers and check. The world will forget you both. Oliver stood tall, voice steady. Maybe, but at least we'll remember who we are. Sir Reginald swept from the office, slamming the door behind him. For a moment, neither Charlotte nor Oliver spoke. Then Charlotte offered a rare, genuine smile. That took guts. Oliver shrugged, relief flooding his chest. He's not just a horse. He's family now. Charlotte nodded, her eyes shining with respect. Let's get back to work. There's still a long road ahead. As they stepped out of the office, Oliver knew they'd just made enemies in high places. But he also knew that for the first time, he'd chosen his own future, and Duke's. The stables buzzed with whispers as Sir Reginald's car disappeared down the drive, but Oliver ignored them. He made his way to Duke's stall, stroked the big black horse's muzzle and whispered, "You're safe, I promise." And for a moment, all the weight of the world seemed to lift. The days blurred together as the Royal Windsor Horse Show drew near, bringing a storm of anticipation and pressure that pressed on everyone at Hawthorne stables. Charlotte tightened her routines, rehearsing every step, double-checking tack, and running through show schedules until late into the night. Oliver poured his heart into Duke's training, determined to justify the faith that had been placed in both of them. The tension was electric. Journalists called, wanting interviews. People who had once dismissed Oliver as a nobody now watched his every move, curious to see if the miracle at Hickstead was a fluke or the start of something real. But beneath the buzz and hope, unease crept in like a cold draft under the door. Sir Reginald might have left in defeat, but his shadow lingered. Charlotte, always careful, quietly told Oliver to keep an eye out for anything strange. "Hartley never takes no for an answer," she warned. "He'll want revenge. Stay sharp." It was Alfie, restless as ever, who first noticed that something was off. He'd taken to doing late-night checks of the barn, saying he liked the peace and the quiet. But one dawn, Alfie burst into the tack room, his face white as milk. "Ollie, someone's been in the barn. Last night. I found muddy footprints by Duke's stall, and the security camera outside. It's dead. Like wires cut dead." A chill ran down Oliver's spine. "Did you see anyone?" Alfie shook his head, angry and scared. "No, but Duke's acting weird. Wouldn't eat this morning. Kind of off. I thought maybe he was just nervous, but now... I don't know, man. It's not right." They hurried to the barn together. Duke stood with his head hanging low, eyes glassy, his usual fire dulled. He barely flicked an ear when Oliver entered, and when he tried to coax the stallion with an apple, Duke ignored him completely. Oliver's heart hammered. Something's wrong. He's not himself. Charlotte appeared at their backs, instantly assessing the scene. Her eyes narrowed. "Get the vet, now, and save the feed sample." Within half an hour, the on-call veterinarian arrived and quickly drew blood from Duke, sending samples to the lab. As the barn staff waited, Charlotte stalked the perimeter, scanning the fences, demanding a sweep of every inch of security footage they had. Oliver watched, his chest tight, as Duke swayed in his stall, sweat dampening his flanks. The air in the barn was heavy and tense, every person moving with anxious energy, waiting for a sign. The vet returned with news that confirmed everyone's worst fears. "Someone dosed his feed," she said grimly. "It's been diluted with a mild tranquilizer. Not enough to kill him, but enough to make him sluggish. It'll be out of his system soon, but he can't compete like this. It's sabotage." Oliver's fists clenched. Who would do that? Charlotte's jaw tightened. Someone desperate, Someone with a lot to lose if Duke wins. No one said Sir Reginald's name, but everyone was thinking it. The air in the barn felt thick with anger and fear. The police were called, but Charlotte knew better than to expect justice, not with someone as powerful as Hartley behind the scenes. He's covered his tracks. There's nothing we can prove, she muttered, frustration hardening her features. It's our word against his, and right now, that isn't enough. Word of the sabotage spread quickly through the equestrian world. Social media lit up with speculation. Was Duke out? Was the fairy tale over? Fans rallied to Oliver and Charlotte's side, demanding answers, but there was nothing they could do except wait and hope the drugs left Duke's system in time for the show. That night, the barn became a war room. Charlotte paced back and forth, phone glued to her ear, calling in favors with everyone from vets to sports journalists. Alfie stood guard outside Duke's stall, a flashlight in one hand, an old cricket bat in the other, daring anyone to come near. The other stable hands rallied too, refusing to leave until dawn broke over Berkshire. Oliver barely slept, sitting by Duke's side all night. He stroked the stallion's neck, whispered promises, told him stories of hope and second chances. We're not done yet, big guy, not by a long shot. You're stronger than this. We both are. Duke blinked at him, the fight slowly coming back to his eyes as the night wore on. By morning, Duke was sweating but standing. The drugs were leaving his system, though his body was still sluggish. The vet ran more tests, watching closely. He'll be tired, but he'll pull through. Just be careful. He's not at his peak. Oliver nodded. He just has to get to that ring. The rest, we'll figure it out. Charlotte made the official announcement to the press. There was an incident, but Duke and Oliver will still compete. We won't be intimidated. We won't back down. The crowd, already fired up by the drama, exploded in support. Messages poured in from around the country. People who'd never heard of Midnight Duke now had a hero to root for. As they prepared to leave for Royal Windsor, Oliver caught Alfie's eye. Thanks for keeping watch last night, he said, his voice quiet. Alfie grinned, but his bravado was softer. We look out for our own, yeah? You got this, mate. Duke's a fighter. And so, battered but unbroken, the team loaded up and rolled out for the biggest show of their lives. The threat still lingered, the culprit still free, but Oliver felt a new kind of strength inside him. The kind that came from fighting back, together, no matter the odds. That night, as they arrived at the showgrounds, Oliver stood by Duke's side and watched the stars shimmer over Windsor, vowing that come morning, the world would see exactly what they were made of. Royal Windsor Horse Show dawned crisp and clear, the kind of morning that seemed made for miracles. Banners snapped in the breeze. The air was charged with anticipation, humming with the nervous energy of riders, trainers, and horses from every corner of the country. This was the moment that separated legends from footnotes, and everyone, especially the reporters, had their eyes on Hawthorne stables. Oliver woke before the sun, running through routines in his head as he dressed in borrowed show whites. Outside, Duke stood quietly, his coat gleaming but his movements still a little slow, the after-effects of the tranquilizer clinging to him like fog. The vet had checked him one last time. He's cleared to compete, she'd said. But don't push him past his limit, Oliver. Listen to him. You're a team. Oliver nodded, nerves twisting inside him. We're in this together. I promise. The showgrounds were buzzing when Charlotte led Oliver and Duke through the gates. Whispers followed them. That's the horse from Hickstead. Isn't that the kid from Bristol? Heard someone tried to knock him out of the competition. Flashbulbs popped. Social media was already alive with hashtags. Midnight Duke, Oliver, the Underdog, Nanzash's second chance. Back at the barn, Charlotte found Oliver sitting quietly beside Duke, brushing his mane. She crouched down, voice low. Ignore the noise. Just ride your ride. Nobody gets to tell your story but you. He nodded, swallowing his fear, and squeezed her hand. Thanks, coach. They entered the warm-up ring, Duke's ears twitching at every sound, muscles tense beneath Oliver's legs. For a moment, Oliver wondered if they should withdraw. Was he asking too much of his partner? But then Duke glanced back, a wild fire sparking in his eyes, as if to say, "Not yet. Not today." They moved as one, circling the ring, each jump a silent conversation. "Trust me. I've got you." The call came for their division. Show jumping, 1.55 meters. The arena was a sea of color, packed stands rising high, all eyes on the starting gate. Oliver's hands shook as he picked up the reins. Duke stood tall, snorting, his head high. The announcer's voice boomed, "Next up, Oliver Beaumont and Midnight Duke." They trotted in to scattered applause, but mostly a hush, people holding their breath, waiting to see if the miracle was real or just luck. The bell rang. Oliver gathered himself. "Ready, boy?" Duke's ears flicked back. They cantered forward. The first jump came fast. Duke soared, clearing it with inches to spare. The crowd murmured. Second jump. Another clean effort, though Oliver felt the horse's stride tighten, fatigue pulling at him. "You're doing great," he whispered, offering encouragement through the clicker and gentle squeeze of his calves. They flew over the third, but a stumble at the fourth nearly unseated Oliver. He gritted his teeth, refusing to panic, adjusting their rhythm. At the turn, he saw Sir Reginald Hartley watching from the VIP stands, a sour look on his face. Good, Oliver thought. Let him watch. The next three jumps blurred. Duke, despite exhaustion, was giving everything. The crowd was leaning in, some standing, some already filming with their phones, catching every moment. The final combination loomed, the tallest and trickiest of the course. A double oxer followed by a narrow vertical, barely a stride between. Duke hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Oliver could feel his partner's heart pounding through the reins. And then, Duke surged forward, clearing the oxer but stumbling as his hoof landed awkwardly. The world seemed to freeze. Oliver lost his stirrups. For a split second he almost fell, but then without thinking, he dropped his crop, gripped with his knees, and urged Duke on with just his voice and bare hands. "Come on, boy. Just you and me. You're free. Let's go." Duke leapt the final fence, Oliver riding without stirrups, heels jammed down, hands buried in Duke's mane. The crowd gasped, then erupted as horse and rider cleared the vertical by a hair's breadth, landing together, wild and off balance but upright. For a long second, the arena was silent. Then the applause exploded. Oliver slowed Duke, breathless, nearly in tears. He felt more alive than he'd ever been. Duke's sides heaved, sweat flecking his black coat, but his eyes shone. The judge's voice cracked as she announced, "Fourth place, but a performance for the ages. No whip, no shortcuts, just heart." The arena shook with cheers. Reporters crowded the rails. Someone shouted, "That boy's got guts!" And a woman nearby wept openly. But what came next, no one could have predicted. A video, shot by a teenager in the stands, went viral within hours. It captured the entire round, the stumble, the lost crop, Oliver's barefoot ride, and the whispered words to Duke. The hashtag, Boy with no whip shot to the top of TikTok. 10 million views in a single day. Comments flooded in. That's real partnership. He saved that horse and the horse saved him. Hartley's done. This is the future of riding. Sir Reginald Hartley left before the final awards. Face stormy. No interview. No handshake. No more power in the ring. Charlotte hugged Oliver at the gate, eyes shining. You did it. Not just for you, but for everyone who believes in second chances. As the sun dipped over Windsor, Oliver walked Duke back to the barn, surrounded by strangers wanting selfies, children reaching out to touch the miracle horse, and reporters shouting questions. But none of that mattered. Not now. He leaned close to Duke's ear and whispered, You showed them, big guy. You showed them all. And for the first time since Duke's fall from grace, Oliver knew, really knew, they'd already won, no matter what the scoreboard said. The morning after Royal Windsor, everything felt different. Oliver awoke to his phone buzzing endlessly. Interview requests, fan messages, and notifications from every corner of the internet. Overnight, he and Duke had become something more than just an underdog story. They were suddenly a symbol of resilience, of compassion, of a new way forward. As sunlight filtered through the curtains, Oliver lay there for a moment, letting it all sink in. This was bigger than a show ribbon, bigger even than saving Duke. People everywhere had seen what was possible when trust and patience triumphed over dominance and fear. It was Charlotte who first saw the bigger picture. Over coffee in the old kitchen, she scrolled through a storm of online reactions, reading aloud. Listen to this. That's what happens when you treat animals with respect, not just as tools for profit. And here, if only more people trained their horses, or their kids, or their employees this way. She looked up at Oliver, pride softening the lines of her usually stern face. They're right, you know. You did more than just jump a few fences. You proved there's another way. That day, a documentary crew arrived at the stables to film a segment for the BBC's Sports Hour. Cameras trailed Oliver as he worked with Duke, capturing every detail, the gentle clicker, the easy voice, the way Oliver moved slowly, never forcing, always inviting. The director whispered to his assistant, You can see the change. The horse isn't just performing, he's choosing to be here. Later, during the interview, the host leaned in, genuinely curious. Oliver, people want to know. What made the difference? Why did Duke change for you? Oliver considered. It's about positive reinforcement, he explained. It's about trust. Every day I rewarded him for choosing calm over panic, for staying with me instead of running away. I stopped trying to dominate him and started listening. Horses aren't robots. They have feelings, fears, memories, just like us. The vet, who'd watched quietly from the edge of the ring, chimed in. DEFRA's welfare code makes it clear. Animals deserve respect and care. But what you're doing is even more than that. You're showing what real partnership looks like. The conversation turned to methods, old and new. The host brought up the tradition of breaking horses, the outdated notion that you have to show them who's boss. Charlotte shook her head. Dominance is easy to preach when you're stronger. But true leadership? That's about empathy. It's about guiding, not bullying. She looked to Oliver, then to the cameras. What happened here isn't magic. It's science, and it's heart. Clips from the BBC interview found their way online, sparking debate. Some trainers scoffed at the soft approach, but the tide was turning. Parents commented that they'd tried similar techniques with their children and saw them thrive. Managers wrote about how listening and encouraging their teams had transformed their workplaces. Pet owners shared their own stories. A rescue dog who'd bloomed under gentle care. A shy cat who'd finally come out from under the bed. The stables became a kind of pilgrimage site. Emails arrived from all over. Coaches, teachers, animal lovers. One message stood out, from a girl in Liverpool. "Thank you for showing the world that it's okay to be patient. My parents never understood my horse, but now they want to try what you did. You gave me hope." One afternoon, as the buzz began to settle, Oliver sat with Rory under the old willow near the paddocks. The old groundskeeper watched the horses graze, his hands folded over his cane. "You know, boy," Rory began, "most folks think training's about breaking spirits, but the truth is, we're all just animals trying to figure out where we belong. Duke didn't need a master. He needed a friend." Oliver nodded, watching Duke nibble grass with the other horses, content at last. "I used to think fixing him would fix me too," Oliver admitted. "But now I think maybe we just needed to learn from each other." Rory smiled, eyes twinkling. "That's all any of us can hope for. You showed the world a better way. Doesn't matter if it's horses, people, or anything in between." Charlotte joined them, her arms crossed but her face softer than ever. "You know, I got calls from 2 Olympic coaches today. They want to talk to you about this partnership stuff. They're finally asking questions that matter." Oliver blushed, embarrassment and pride mingling. "It's not about me. It's about Duke. He's the real teacher." Charlotte shook her head. "You're both the proof. That's what matters." As the sun set over Berkshire, Oliver thought about everything that had happened. The failures, the setbacks, the moments when it all seemed impossible. None of it had come easy, and nothing had gone according to plan. But maybe that was the point. Maybe in a world obsessed with domination and quick fixes, the real victory was showing that patience and kindness could change even the hardest hearts. The stables settled into a new routine, busier than ever, full of visitors and media, but somehow warmer. The staff, once skeptical, had started using clickers and treats, their voices softer, their movements slower. Horses that had once been labeled trouble now stood quietly, waiting for a gentle hand. Oliver texted his grandmother that night, sending her a selfie with Duke and a simple message. "We did it, Gran. We really did." Her reply was instant. "I never doubted you, Ollie. Keep listening. The world needs more of that." And for the first time, Oliver let himself believe it. Summer in Berkshire felt sweeter than ever before. Days were longer, sunlight turning the paddocks to gold, and the stables buzzed with a new sense of possibility. There were new faces everywhere, young riders eager to learn, reporters still trailing behind, fans snapping selfies at the gate. And yet, for Oliver, life settled into something gentle and real. He'd grown used to the rhythm of early mornings and late nights, the quiet trust between horse and human, the slow but steady work of building something lasting. One clear morning, Charlotte found Oliver mucking out a stall, sweat on his brow, sleeves rolled up. She waved a letter at him, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "It's here, official British Equestrian Federation. You've been awarded the Youth Trainer Scholarship, Oliver. Full ride. And they want you to work with Duke as your partner for the national tour." For a second, Oliver could only blink, letting the words sink in. He looked to Duke, who watched from his stall with wise, dark eyes. "You hear that, buddy? We're going big time." Duke nickered, tossing his head as if he understood everything. Charlotte clapped him on the shoulder. "You earned this, kid. Both of you did. I hope you're ready. They want you to talk about your training methods, teach clinics, travel, show people what partnership looks like." Oliver laughed, nerves and joy mingling. "I'm ready if Duke's ready." As if on cue, Edith Beaumont appeared in the barn doorway, suitcase in hand, a smile stretched across her face. "I've decided," she announced. "I'm moving up here. The city's no place for old bones, and I want to see you make history." The barn erupted in cheers. The staff, who'd once eyed Oliver with doubt, welcomed Edith like royalty. That evening, she settled into a cozy cottage overlooking the training fields, her laughter a steady, gentle presence in Oliver's new world. But the biggest change came for Duke. The Stallion, once a cast-off, was now the face of something much larger, a movement, a mission, a hope. Together with Charlotte, Oliver launched Second Chance, a rescue program dedicated to giving abandoned or abused horses a shot at new lives. Local businesses pledged donations, volunteers signed up by the dozens. Soon, horses from all over England began to arrive at Hawthorne stables, each with a history, each with a chance to start again. One rainy Saturday, a group of children from Edith's old school arrived for a field trip. Most had never seen a horse before. They were shy, hovering at the fence until Oliver coaxed them closer. He taught them to feed Duke carrots and run a brush down his glossy neck. Duke stood calmly, even with tiny hands tugging at his mane, ears flicking as if he understood these kids needed his gentleness most of all. A girl with bright red glasses looked up at Oliver. "Was Duke really a bad horse?" she asked. Oliver shook his head. "No horse is born bad. Sometimes the world's just rough, but you can always try again." Word of Second Chance spread, and soon Oliver was invited to speak at events and appear on morning shows. But he never lost sight of what mattered most: the barn, the horses, the feeling of connection that could only come in the quiet hours when the world wasn't watching. He'd sit with Duke in the evenings, the barn soft with the glow of lantern light, talking about their day, their plans, their dreams. Sometimes, when the stars were bright and the air was still, Oliver wondered at how far they'd come. He thought about the boy who'd stepped off a bus from Bristol, full of fear but also hope. He remembered the anger, the heartbreak, the moments when he'd nearly given up, and he realized, with a quiet certainty, that none of it had been wasted. Every setback, every failure, every slow day of trust-building had led to this. Not just victory in the arena, but something deeper. Real partnership. Real change. Charlotte once told him, "Winning is sweet, but legacy is better." Oliver carried those words everywhere, sharing them with every new rider, every skeptical trainer, every lost horse that arrived at their gates. He told people the truth, that animals need respect more than fear, that kindness doesn't make you weak, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is listen. One evening, as summer faded toward fall, Oliver hosted an open house at the stables. Families poured in, sharing stories about their own pets and challenges. There was laughter, a few tears, and always the steady, comforting presence of Duke, now a legend in his own right. Charlotte stood by Oliver, proud and happy, and Edith baked cookies for everyone. At the end of the night, Oliver stepped up to the rail and addressed the crowd. "We live in a world that's obsessed with scores, medals, and money. But the truth is, none of that matters if we lose our hearts along the way. Duke and I, well, we're proof that second chances are real. That if you listen, if you trust, you can turn failure into something beautiful. So whether you're training a horse, raising a child, or just trying to get through a hard day, remember, partnership beats power. Every time. He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. Kids, parents, strangers, old friends. Tell us your stories, he invited. Share what you've learned, what you've struggled with, how you found your own second chances. And if you want more stories like ours, don't forget to follow us. Join the Second Chance Project and help us change lives, one hoofprint at a time. The applause rolled over him, warm and real. As night fell and the barn lights glowed against the darkness, Oliver walked Duke out to the fields one last time before bed. He stood quietly, looking up at the stars. "We did it, buddy," he whispered. "Not just for us, for everyone." Duke nuzzled his shoulder, and in that quiet moment, Oliver knew their story had only just begun.